Meredith, thanks for taking some time to talk about your experience in the Master of Science in Higher Education Administration program at New England College. But before we get to some of those questions, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Of course. Well, first, thank you for having me. So yes, I am a graduate of the Master of Higher Education Administration program here at NEC. Graduated last summer, so summer of 2023 for those of you that are watching.
Yeah.
Currently, I work at New England College. I have been here since March of 2021. And my current role is Assistant Director of Academic Advising. I primarily work with our undergraduate residential students, and then I also have a population of our undergraduate online students.
Great. So I'm guessing part of the reason you chose to enroll in the program because you worked at NEC, but are there some other reasons why you chose the program?
Great question. So yes, I remember when I first started at NEC, so many of my colleagues either knew about the program, had been enrolled in the program, knew other students that had done the program, and they were all positive feedback that I had received. So for me, I knew I love learning. I love continuing my education. I previously have bachelor's in elementary education and sociology. And when I stepped back into the higher education realm, getting a degree in higher education only made the most sense to me to really get a full picture of what I'm doing in higher ed. I had my experience as an undergraduate student and as an undergraduate student worker, but I really wanted to understand how everything worked. So when I heard so much positive feedback from my colleagues, I spoke with some that directly had worked in the program, and then I had read about it. I really knew that it was the program for me. The timing was right for me. I really enjoyed knowing that I had options for timeline, which I'm sure we'll get into with my answers later on. But hopefully that kind of gives a good summary that I heard abundance of positive things, and I knew it was the right decision for me to proceed with my career in higher ed.
Great. So you heard a lot of positive things, but what was your experience like?
Great question. So for me, and I worked very closely with you, as you know, but for those that don't know, in my experience, honestly, I was a bit overwhelmed at first. It was the first time that I was working a full-time job and being a full-time student. What I liked about the experience was that I had the option of doing a 1-year track or a 2-year track. At first, I was leaning on the 2-year track, and then I realized I'd been registered for the 2 classes, and I was like, do I say something? Should I, and I work in academic advising, so I was like, should I, just tell the academic advisor at the time that maybe I should just do 1? And I asked my husband at the time, I was like, should I try 1 or 2? And he said, what's the risk? Try the 2. So I tried the 2, which wasn't my initial plan, but I am so grateful that I did. And the reason being, for me, I was able to connect 2 classes together on top of my job. So a lot of times I was able to pull information from 1 class and then take it to the other class and add that to my discussion or my papers, or I had additional resources to rely on. So for me, again, I was a little overwhelmed at first trying to balance those 2 classes on top of my work. However, I quickly realized how supportive the program was. I remember my first term being overwhelmed that first week, and I reached out to my instructors right away. One of my instructors that first term had a Zoom meeting. It was an optional meeting for us to jump in if we wanted to talk to her. And I remember that first interaction was, tell me about yourselves. And I remember saying, I'm a bit overwhelmed. I'm working full time. I'm back in school. What do I do? And she was, first you need to just breathe and enjoy the experience. And she was so great at just recognizing that we're all people behind the screen as online learners. We all are balancing different things such as family and work or anything else we're involved in outside of our work. And for me, that ongoing support really made that 2-year or that 1-year plan manageable for me. Do you want me to keep going with my experience? Because that was the beginning.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the pace. And so you ended, going full time in this program is 2 courses per 7-week term. So really the equivalent of 4 courses per semester. But the benefit was you finished in 10 months. So how did you manage all of that? You were working full time. How did you? I'm sure there are other responsibilities besides work and coursework. So how did you manage all that?
It's a great question as well. Again, I think I've mentioned this maybe once or twice. I'm kind of a perfectionist. So I think I put a little bit more pressure on myself than I needed to looking back, but that's just how I am as a student. So for me, I definitely think it was a learning curve. I
Mhm.
think learning to prioritize yourself was still super important and a big learning piece I figured out as each semester progressed.
Yeah.
But overall, having a very strict schedule if you're going to do the 1-year track
Yeah.
is so important. And the biggest word I use to so many students is discipline. Discipline, discipline, discipline. That is so important to be successful with the 2 classes per term because they move very quickly.
Yeah.
So for me, when I started the class technically started on Monday, but you gain access to the class on Friday. It is not mandatory, but for me, it worked best to take time over the weekend to look over the syllabus, look over all of the details on Blackboard, make a calendar of that first week at least. So when Monday came around, I had a plan. Oftentimes, on my lunch break, I spent half the break
Mhm.
decompressing, eating my lunch, and then maybe the other half of my lunch break, I was reading a chapter or taking
Yeah.
some notes or rereading what I had already read the night prior. So I was consistently looking at my coursework. So either during lunch break and then when I got home at the beginning, I was just jumping straight into it. Right when I walked into the door, I quickly realized I needed to take some time for me,
Mhm.
decompress, and then switch to student mode. So every class was different with how it was structured, but typically I had carved out times each night that I would work on it. Depending on the semester, I really tried to have 1 day a week that I could just take a break for myself.
Yeah.
It was great if those could be Saturdays because then I could spend time with my family. And then another weekend day would be a very full work day for schoolwork explicitly. So for instance, Sunday would often be a full day.
Mhm.
But that was
Yeah.
an easier way to balance and take away some of those hours during my regular work week.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit more about your experience in the program.
Absolutely. I think one of the biggest things that I'm going to keep repeating myself is the community. Even though it's asynchronous learning, and although your classes, it's not maybe like an undergraduate class that you have a lot of classmates, you might have a small group of classmates in a way that benefits you because you really get comfortable with those classmates and you have classes with them throughout each term. For me, working with my classmates and my instructors really benefited my success. I would Zoom with my instructors, sometimes once a week, sometimes only once a semester, depending on the class. They would challenge me with we'd go over my assignments, they'd go over
Yeah.
those with me, review them, say, this is what I was thinking when I was giving you the feedback for this. And it really clarified, what they were thinking behind the screen. Another thing I really enjoyed about the program was that it pushed my thinking. Every day I was thinking at my job, okay, what have I learned outside, in the classroom, and how can I apply it to this situation? I remember the first class I took was the advising and helping class, which was very relevant to what I did with my work. And I constantly was looking at that book and thinking of situations that was going on and thinking, what is the best and most effective way to go about this situation? So for me, the ongoing learning was so important in my work and continues to be today. Just earlier this afternoon, I was talking to a colleague and I was thinking about the law class I took and thinking, well, in my law class, I remember we were talking about this and, it wasn't, and I even said, it's nothing about law, but just the idea of thinking about policies in place. Like we're constantly thinking back on how we're applying our previous learning. I feel like I'm talking about my coursework all the time, in my regular job with my colleagues. And it just really demonstrates how relevant the information is. Higher education is constantly evolving, constantly changing, and that continuous education is so important for us to remain relevant to best support our students.
Great. So what would you say are the strengths of the program?
I kind of touched upon these a little bit already, but I'll go into more depth. So definitely the smaller class size, getting to know your classmates is so important, knowing, their backgrounds. Maybe they're doing something completely different than you. So they have a different, whole different opinion of how they would approach a situation. Maybe their undergraduate background was completely different. So they can tie in those pieces. So having that small class size really gives you that one-on-one attention with your instructor, but also to feel more comfortable learning from your classmates. Another key piece are the content experts. So sometimes you'll have a program, probably more likely an undergrad program, that you'll have repeat teachers within a certain field. In this program, I had different instructors for most of my classes, and that was because they were experts in that field. So for instance, that law class I was mentioning, the professor for that class, oh my goodness, he was a wealth of knowledge. You could tell how much law, pretty sure he had the law degrees, like he had so many degrees. I remember that. Gavin, I'm sure you can speak highly of him as well. He was just a wealth of knowledge, and you could tell that law was his passion. And then you have someone, I remember my assessment instructor. He knew so much about assessment. He was an expert in that. He loved it. And you thrive off of that passion. If you have someone that isn't as knowledgeable or isn't as passionate, you may not feel as connected to the content or as excited. For instance, I was pretty nervous going into assessment, but he just made it so enjoyable because he loved it. So definitely the content experts in the field. And also the flexibility, the ability to have the option of doing 1 or 2 classes, and the flexibility of it being online asynchronous. Because if you don't like to work at the evening times, you can work in the morning times, whatever works best with your work schedule. Or maybe you don't work, a traditional 9 to 5 job. You work 3rd shift. You can work around that. And lastly, the continuous opportunities to learn from others. In multiple of my classes, not only are you learning from your instructors or your classmates, but you're motivated to learn from other professionals in the higher education field.
Excellent. Anything else you'd share about the program?
Anything else I'd like to share? That's a big question because I feel like I could be here all day. But I think my biggest piece of advice is if you are even considering this program, please just take the time to schedule a meeting with either a graduate admissions counselor or Gavin Henning. Either person or department is great. I have personally been in those meetings with Gavin when he meets a student that's interested and just wants to talk about the program. There's no pressure. It's just to understand what the program is all about and see if it's a best fit for you. So for me, if any advice is out there, if you're questioning the program, at least schedule a meeting with Gavin. I'm sure, Gavin, you'll share your contact information as well as it's on the website, but come and talk to us. We're happy to talk about our experiences and our knowledge, and I hope you do so.
Great. Thanks for taking time, Meredith. Appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you.